Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's important today that we rise to speak to this important matter. Tasmanian Labor on this side of the House bring forward conversations that we have in community, concerns that are expressed to us in community, in order that we raise the understanding and awareness of what is for so many Tasmanians a debilitating impact of having to work hard on behalf of themselves, often by themselves, to rectify the small number of examples, and examples not of all builders in Tasmania, but to rectify major defects in building works that have happened often in the single greatest investment that someone makes in their life. Often people that have stretched themselves, that have committed to an investment to build their dream home, often their first and only ever home, and find that before completion, throughout the process and at conclusion, they have a property that they may not be able to live in, that may in fact need to be torn down, or that they can't get someone to commit to come back and rectify the defect works in the property. We've heard today a number of comments around the supports that are provided for people in our community, yet we still hear from people that are having to mount very expensive and emotionally draining, impactful action in order to not even yet for some find resolution of these important issues. There is not sufficient government oversight. Our regulations are inadequate. Too many consumers are left with thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, over $100,000 of ruining debt for themselves and their families. We're raising these issues on behalf of members of our community. This is not politics, although the member for Franklin said that, in fact, by nature, many of these concerns are political. But this is not politics. This is personal. No, for people in our community that we sit down with and hear from, the impacts, both personally and in their families, their financial impacts, their emotional impacts, the impact on their relationships, on their children and on their networks are, for many, debilitating. A government at any point needs to stand up and accept, and we've heard the Minister this morning take responsibility and accept the concerns that are being presented in the community, but then need to take the next steps and say, what can we do now that will ensure that the current concerns are rectified and this doesn't happen again in the future? And we have heard from the Minister that there is a suggested pathway that if mediation isn't successful, that if CBOS isn't successful, that it could go through to TASCAT. But there are concerns with that outcome and also concerns of the timeliness of when that might be implemented. For many in our community right now,
parliamentary inquiry won't do anything.
So, taking up the interjection of the Minister, given that she mentioned the parliamentary inquiry, what a parliamentary inquiry does, it puts all the facts out on the table, it brings experts to a table, it allows people to discuss, to consider what happens in other jurisdictions, make recommendations and ensure that things are implemented to make sure that... I spoke to a gentleman in Launceston in a cafe who shared with me the work that was done on his building where the cladding wasn't applied either by code or by the manufacturer's instructions, in order to get someone to come back and rectify that 6 years later, still unresolved. That there were issues in the bathroom where inadequate water protection, where there's been water damage in the bathroom, 6 years later, still not protected. Another gentleman that I'm aware of through this same conversation that has had tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage on an application on a concrete floor, not adequately resolved now, 4 years later. These are tens of thousands, over $100,000 worth of impact of people in our community who are having to act on their own behalf. Where the Minister says an inquiry will not resolve this, we know that the people of Tasmania are calling, whether it's 40 people identified through the ABC just recently, whether it's a Facebook page that's set up in the community 3 months ago, which when I checked the numbers this morning, there were I think 281 members, and then when I just checked then it's at 284. There are new cases being shared in community daily about concerns of defect building activity, and we need to do more to protect that. What are we scared of with an inquiry? What are you scared that will be identified and recommended that you won't be willing to implement? Tasmanian Labor on this side of the House want to bring forward the concerns of the community. We want to ensure that everything possible that is done to protect members of our community. TasCat, it may be good, but there's no guarantee that it'll incorporate building disputes anytime soon, and there's no guarantee that it'll improve the system for consumers. Right now, CBOS can't do the things that it needs to be able to do to support people in our community with concerns, and if it can, it gets tied up for months or years in court. Will this change through TasCat? Is it enough? Will it actually be able to provide the solutions that people are looking for in our community? People in our community that we already understand where there's an emotional weight on an individual or in a family, the impact of mental health concerns, the challenges that these types of experiences occur, impact family, impact marriages. We're seeing all sorts of a gentleman disclose, and it must have been painful to disclose recently publicly through the media, close to being able to consider taking his own life because of the impact of these financial burdens. We know families and marriages that are at risk because of these financial burdens. This is not politics. This is deeply personal for the people that are impacted. And yes, we have in Tasmania a small number of people that are causing these great concerns to many members of our community. However, and it is important to note, and I know the Minister wants us to note this, and so we celebrate so many things that are amazing in Tasmania. We have some of the best builders, not only in the state but in the country. We have people that aspire to excellence. We know that even the best builders sometimes have defects. They go back and fix them. What we are dealing with is the small number of people that are making critical impacts to the single greatest investment to many people in our community's life. It's not good enough. More needs to be done.